So if we bring Thomas back in now, what would be great to do, because we want to make sure we've got time for a few questions at the end, and we are running out of time. It will be great just to hear from both of you in terms of, for the people in the room today and who've listened to some of the insight and experience that you both have, what's the one message you want them to take away from today? So if they were to go, when they go back to the office later or tomorrow and are back at the desk thinking, I want to try and find a different way to build impact or purpose into my storytelling, what's your top piece of advice? Thomas, maybe we'll come to you first.
Yeah, and first up, congratulations and closing the loop in the 2.7 million phones collected. I think that's a huge achievement. I've been in that crowd, and I've seen the garbage around the city just in general. So I think it's really a worthwhile endeavor, and also as you said, Ross, I mean, it's when it's the right time and place to do it, exactly when people need a new phone, right? And we talk about convenience, you're relieving people of feeling guilt around buying potentially new handsets. I think a very, very good message there. I think one of my key messages is that we can keep talking about this for a very, very long time. By the end of the day, marketing, advertising, all of these things are driven by bravery, about wanting to stand out, taking a chance. That's really what sort of drives brands forward, because you differentiate, you tell more exciting stories. So I'll probably go with the sort of more human aspect of all of this. I think we just need to sometimes stick to our guts and be brave enough to do these things. It's easier said than done, but typically what I advise clients to do is to say that most, if you just set a small fragment of your marketing budget aside, typically you would anyway set some aside, 3 to 5% for something a little bit quirky, fun, whatever. Why not align that with projects like Anna's? Use those 3 to 5% as a way of betting on something that might pay off really, really well. And I've seen that so many times. MasterCard is a brilliant example of that have done campaigns that really resonate around refugees in Poland coming in from Ukraine. They did an amazing stunt there that's now being adopted by the Polish government as a way of creating more work, not just for refugees, but for Polish people in rural areas in general. So I think be bold. I think if you're not bold, you might as well just go work in a bank rather than advertising.
Brilliant. I love that. Thank you very much, Thomas. Anna, what about you? What would be the one piece of advice that you could give people listening today, having been in the thick of a campaign recently that's really worked?
Is it too bad to say again, keep it simple? No, I think the connection should just be very clear to whoever your target audience is. And I know that's what we learn in marketing in the first day of school, let's say, but it's not always there. Just make sure that if your mom can understand it, if your brother can understand it, then the world can understand it, and make sure it connects to a value that they recognize, a value that people actually see as important. So that's something that I really see happening with what we do, because again, maybe they're not looking for it, but when it happens, they realize that it does add up to that green need that they maybe have. And yeah, give it a chance to impact stories, right? Ours, any, just think how they can be core of your brand in a as good as when you sell, like in my past life, an air fryer. Just keep it, make it sure that it resonates and it's part of the brand and the product since the beginning, not at the end like a sprinkle. So it's really that. I can never just give one. But
no, that's great. I love that. And I think one of the things with creative people and people who work in communications and advertising is that we also kind of love our own brilliance. And sometimes we overcomplicate things because we're trying so hard to be brilliant that we forget actually simplicity is sometimes the most brilliant thing. So I think that's great. Thanks, Anna. We have had a second poll kind of running in the background. just to hear from the people on the call, on the audience, about really what makes a purpose story stick with you. And I think going back to the 1for1 example, what's interesting is how well real voices perform. So, you know, hearing from some of the people collecting phones on the ground in Africa is obviously really, really important to the 1for1 campaign, and that polls highly in the audience poll today. And then this idea of simplicity and that sort of fast track to emotion also comes across really strongly. So as a group on the webinar today, we're all actually really aligned on what good looks like. And I think that's, you know, a helpful thing for people to take away today. We've got about 5 minutes left. So if you have got a burning question for Thomas or for Anna, please do pop it into the chat, and we can pass that on to them, and we can answer those questions. One that we have had in already is really about how anxious should we all be about greenwashing. So a lot of people who work in big corporates are used to having legal teams poring over everything. Sometimes that kills the creativity of where the advertising and marketing people would want to go. Obviously, there's shifting sands in terms of regulation at the moment, particularly in Europe. But have you got advice for people about who are maybe worried about falling between greenwashing and green hushing? Thomas, what do you think people should be aware of?
Again, I think we've had a greenwashing conversation before. I think it's probably the third time that it reemerges as a topic in my professional career. And I think we tend to pretend that it's the first time we ever heard about greenwashing. Like I said before, advertising marketing is dealing with risks, right? I don't ever recommend anybody to oversell the little that they're doing. That's never been helpful for anyone in advertising, so why would we do that? But I think in this day and age, I think we spend too much time discussing greenwashing rather than actually focusing on the other side of the coin, which is what actually drives brand growth, engagement, etc. People really want to hear from big brands how they can help them live better, more climate friendly. We are living in very uncertain times, and what I've seen earlier and what history have taught us is in uncertain times, people tend to go and trust big brands. They trust in institutions, typically go up as well. So I think there's a real opportunity here for big brands to play a key role, and that is not by fearing the stick, but actually looking for the carrot. What's the added value that we can gain in these uncertain times?
Thanks, Thomas. Really helpful. Anna, have you got a perspective on this one?
Well, I think greenwashing, unfortunately, has made it that we don't talk about it at all, right? Because you want to be out of trouble as soon as possible, and the easiest way to be out of trouble is by not talking, and that makes the conversation quiet. So I think we need to dare to start talking about it, and of course do the homework and choose the right wording and make sure that it's backed up and all of that. But I having worked with legal teams that were heavy on the claims we used to do back in corporate life, I think we also have a little bit of a responsibility to push them through, to do our homework properly, but push them through, because otherwise, the moment greenwashing started happening, it immediately created a wall where no one wanted to talk about it, which is the easiest thing to do. But if we don't talk about it, then it also doesn't go. So I think now is a good time to start pushing, also because the world is upside down. So maybe it's a good time to test again and push through.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting, sort of plays back to what Thomas said earlier, which is perhaps the one thing brands need to remember is, even with all the kind of political noise swirling around, those polls do consistently show really, really high percentage of people concerned about the topic. And so actually the issue is not that people don't care about this topic. It's that we're not talking to them about it in the right way that engages with their values. And that just brings me on to just the last question that we've had in from the floor, which is, have you seen a shift in how receptive consumers are to green storytelling in the last few years? And are they more or less receptive? It's a question for the floor. And I think that's an interesting one, because actually what we've been trying to do in this session perhaps is say maybe green storytelling is the problem rather than the solution. But Thomas, maybe if I pose that one to you, do you think there's been a shift in how receptive consumers are to this kind of storytelling in the last couple of years?
We definitely see massive regional differences for sure. Without doubt, if you go more Northern Europe, consumers are highly educated in these topics. There's no doubt that technology like AI will make it even easier for consumers to search out new, greener, healthier solutions. So I think there is a very aware target audience there. And for the brands who start to zigzag in these political uncertain times, will definitely lose the love that they've earned there. What I find especially interesting is that now also in emerging markets, this is becoming or being on the rise as well. Back to the Guardian survey, but even when, and I think we need to remind ourselves of this as well, like green is just not one static thing in time. In my first book advertising, I had a campaign from Hyundai that won a Grand Prix in Cannes that was widely recognized as best practice. If I look at that today, it's greenwashing. When we look to emerging markets and we ask people there, what are some of the green brands? You will be shocked to see that, for example, one of the world's biggest oil companies, Aramco, is on that list because they communicate around green efforts. So, green is there. I mean, with a heating planet, with what we're seeing right now, with more and more people facing the consequences of this stuff, of course it's on the rise, and it's becoming more and more popular in the media space, etc. We have a political reality, and that's why you should never look to politicians. We have a political reality that is not aligned with the average citizen at the moment, not even in the US. So we should not be distracted. I think that's part of the political agenda in the US, is to distract us from the real issues here. And, as long as a time machine is not invented, we cannot go back to a time where fossil fuels are cheaper than renewable. We cannot go back to a time where, unfortunately, white old men like me are on the top. Luckily, we are in a time where it's much more diverse, much more exciting. We need to keep pushing. Yeah. It's on the rise.
I love that. And I think that's a really great summary of how all of these different topics kind of intersect. Impact isn't just about environment. It isn't just about social impact. We're talking about, sort of multifaceted positive impact that we're all trying to get to. So I think that's a great point to kind of close the conversation. What a fascinating conversation. And I really hope that the people on the webinar have really taken away some insights, both from Thomas's obviously long and varied experience, and from Anna's really recent example of a great effective campaign in this space. And thank you for playing along and voting on the polls and sharing your comments with us. And we wish you a really good afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Ross.